The courtroom was packed to capacity, the atmosphere thick with tension and anticipation. Elon Musk, dressed in a sleek black suit with a silver tie, sat confidently at the witness stand, fingers lightly tapping the polished wood as he prepared to respond to a pointed question about SpaceX government contracts. Cameras rolled silently from the far end, streaming the live proceedings across every major platform. His fans were glued to screens around the world. At first, Musk's answers were sharp, precise, and peppered with subtle jabs that hinted at his usual defiant style. He spoke about innovation, freedom of speech, and the power of technology to disrupt outdated systems. But then, with a barely concealed smirk, he launched into a monologue about judicial inefficiency and governmental overreach, which immediately caused murmurs to ripple across the courtroom. Chief Justice John Roberts, seated high above the chamber, furrowed his brow and raised his hand, signaling Musk to stop. Musk continued speaking, ignoring the gesture. "We're not going to solve 21st century problems with 18th century processes," he declared, triggering an audible gasp from the gallery. The Chief Justice's expression hardened. He leaned forward and said firmly, "Mr. Musk, this court is not your press conference." The billionaire paused, still smirking, but now with a flicker of unease in his eyes. Roberts continued, "This is a constitutional court, not a TED Talk. I am warning you to proceed with proper decorum." Musk shrugged slightly, glanced toward his attorney, and leaned into the microphone again. "With all due respect, Your Honor, the people deserve transparency. I'm simply telling them what they already know, that the system is broken." His words, though polished, carried a sharp edge that sent a wave of discomfort through the rows of legal observers and journalists. Roberts's gavel slammed down with a startling crack that silenced the room instantly. The Chief Justice's voice rang out, deeper now, more forceful. "Mr. Musk, I am ordering you to cease these interruptions and answer the questions asked, directly and without spectacle." The tension reached a boiling point. The billionaire's face changed, his smirk fading into something more neutral, even confused. For the first time in the proceedings, Elon Musk seemed off balance. He looked around, perhaps realizing that this was not a stage he could control with charm or intellect. This was the Supreme Court, and Chief Justice John Roberts wasn't playing into anyone's narrative. The air in the room felt heavy, thick with suspense, as millions watched the confrontation unfold live. Elon Musk shifted in his seat, straightened his shoulders, and leaned slightly forward. His voice, though still calm, carried a sharp edge now. "Your Honor," he began, "I must respond to that assertion. I'm not here for spectacle, I'm here because the future of innovation in America is being strangled by outdated policies and fear-driven governance." His words hung in the air for a moment as the Chief Justice stared him down without blinking. Musk, used to commanding boardrooms and swaying public opinion with a single tweet, suddenly found himself facing an authority he couldn't outmaneuver. The energy in the courtroom was electric, every eye on the man who had launched rockets and reshaped industries, now trying to justify his actions before the highest court in the land. Roberts raised a brow, his tone sharper. "Mr. Musk, you are not on trial for your visions of the future. You're here because your companies are accused of violating federal orders and using private platforms to influence public policy inappropriately. Stay on topic." Musk didn't blink. He gestured slightly with his hand, a habit picked up from countless investor presentations. "With respect," he said, "we are here because truth has become uncomfortable. My platforms are not tools of manipulation, they are conduits of transparency. If the federal government finds that threatening, perhaps it's time we discuss who's truly out of bounds." A hushed wave of whispers rippled through the courtroom. The journalists scribbled faster, cameras zoomed in. Musk's legal team looked increasingly uneasy, whispering among themselves as he continued, almost oblivious to the weight of his words. "We're not talking about simple regulations," he added, locking eyes with the Chief Justice. "We're talking about a systematic suppression of innovation under the guise of national interest. If that's illegal, then maybe progress itself is on trial here." That final sentence triggered a visible reaction. Roberts leaned forward, steepled his fingers, and let a beat pass before responding. "Mr. Musk," he said slowly, every syllable landing like a gavel strike, "you are not the first man in history to believe his ideas place him above the law. And you won't be the last. But in this room, laws are not rewritten for the convenience of billionaires." A burst of gasps filled the air as the camera feed caught Musk's expression, a flash of frustration, quickly masked by his usual composure. Still, something had shifted. His confident tone gave way to something more defensive. "I'm not above the law," he insisted. "But neither should the law be used as a weapon against visionaries. I've given this country electric freedom, a path to Mars, and a new voice in media. And yet, here I am being treated like a criminal." He paused, letting the silence do its work, then added, "If that doesn't make people question the system, I don't know what will." For a brief moment, the courtroom was frozen. Even the sound of papers turning or chairs creaking had stopped. Then Chief Justice Roberts, unflinching, responded in a calm, firm voice. "We are questioning the system, Mr. Musk. That's exactly what this proceeding is for. And if you cannot comply with the rules of this court, we will proceed without your cooperation." The room remained locked in silence. Elon Musk, usually the one who commanded the narrative, now found himself cornered, not by public opinion, but by judicial power. The world was watching, and the standoff had only just begun. The room was frozen in a kind of breathless anticipation, every eye locked on Chief Justice John Roberts as he straightened in his chair. Papers shuffled slightly beneath his fingers, but his face was set, emotionless, carved in stone. Elon Musk sat unmoving, his previous fire now replaced with the cold calculation of a man trying to anticipate the next move. His legal team whispered among themselves in a panic, clearly sensing what was coming. Roberts placed his glasses gently on the bench, his voice steady as he began to speak, not with anger, but with a deadly calm that filled the courtroom like a chill wind. "This court has tolerated Mr. Musk's behavior longer than necessary out of respect for his position and the seriousness of the allegations. That patience has now reached its end." A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom gallery. Elon's lips pressed into a thin line. His leg bounced once beneath the table. The judge continued, "The defendant has shown blatant disregard for courtroom procedures, spoken out of turn repeatedly, and used these proceedings as a platform to promote his own agenda, rather than address the questions posed to him." The silence that followed was thick with consequence. Roberts then slowly turned to the bailiff and uttered words that would instantly become headlines. "Remove Mr. Musk from the courtroom. Hold him in contempt. He is to be detained immediately." Gasps broke out. Reporters scrambled for their phones, capturing every angle, every second. The cameras caught Musk's stunned reaction. His eyes blinked rapidly, mouth slightly agape, clearly not expecting the moment to come crashing down with such finality. "You can't be serious," he said in a low voice, but Roberts had already turned back to his papers, unmoved. "Take him to holding," he repeated to the bailiff without another glance at the billionaire. Musk stood abruptly, knocking over his glass of water. A few drops splashed onto his documents, but he didn't notice. "This is an overreach," he said, his voice louder now, tinged with panic and disbelief. "You are making a mistake. I demand the right to speak. I will not be silenced." Two security officers approached, slow but firm. One of Musk's attorneys tried to intervene. "Your Honor, please, this is unprecedented. We request a recess, or at the very least, a verbal warning in lieu of detention." Roberts didn't look up. He's been warned more than once. This court does not negotiate with contempt. The gavel hit the sound block once more, punctuating the end of the debate. The officers reached Musk, who took a step back instinctively, then squared his shoulders. For a brief second, he seemed to wrestle with the idea of resisting, but then lowered his arms, palms open. "I hope you realize what this will do," he said coldly, as one officer gently touched his elbow. "The entire world is watching." Roberts didn't respond. The officers began to escort him out, walking slowly down the aisle. Flashbulbs from the press exploded like lightning. A few attendees whispered audibly, others simply watched in stunned silence. Musk's eyes scanned the room as if trying to find someone, anyone, who might step in and stop this. No one moved. As he neared the courtroom doors, his voice echoed back. "This isn't justice. This is theater." But the doors shut behind him with a heavy finality, cutting off any further protest. Inside, the room remained frozen. Some were stunned by the turn of events, others seemed almost relieved to see order restored. Roberts finally addressed the courtroom. "Let the record show the defendant has been removed for contempt. Proceedings will resume after a short recess." Then he stood, and with that, the most surreal moment in modern courtroom history had just unfolded, live, uncensored, irreversible. Outside the courtroom, chaos erupted instantly. Dozens of journalists swarmed the hallway, microphones extended, cameras flashing wildly. Security quickly formed a barrier as Elon Musk, now flanked closely by 2 officers, was escorted through the frenzied crowd. Reporters shouted questions, their voices overlapping into a wall of noise. "Mr. Musk, do you believe this is politically motivated?" One shouted. "Is this the end of your career?" Another screamed. Musk's jaw was set, his face flushed with anger and disbelief. He didn't answer, didn't even glance toward the cameras. His focus remained dead ahead, each step deliberate, though his mind clearly raced a mile a minute. Somewhere in the crowd, a chant began, half supportive, half jeering, as social media feeds exploded around the world. The officers led him down the marble hallway toward a secure elevator. At one point, Musk slowed slightly, pulling back just enough to speak. "I built more for this country than most of these people ever will," he muttered under his breath, but the microphones picked it up. Within seconds, news outlets blasted his words across television screens and online headlines, Musk defiant as he's escorted away. Inside the elevator, the noise dimmed, replaced by a humming silence. Elon stared at the doors in front of him, hands clenched at his sides, his mind visibly working. Calculating. He wasn't a man easily subdued, and even now, some part of him seemed to be strategizing, plotting his next move. When the elevator doors opened, they stepped into a stark, almost clinical underground hallway leading toward the courthouse holding area. No marble floors here, just plain concrete, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Musk's surroundings had transformed from prestige to punishment in mere minutes. A heavy metal door loomed ahead, and for a split second, Elon Musk, the man who had sent rockets into orbit and revolutionized industries, looked almost small. Almost human. An officer opened the door, and Musk was guided inside, the latch clicking loudly as it closed behind him. Inside the small holding room, there was nothing but a bench bolted to the floor and a thick paneled window too high to see out of. Musk sat down slowly, resting his hands on his knees. He exhaled sharply, the reality sinking in deeper now. He was alone. No cameras. No audience. Just the echo of the day's events replaying in his head. He leaned back against the cold wall, closing his eyes for a moment. The silence was deafening after the courtroom's noise and frenzy. Minutes felt like hours. Somewhere beyond the walls, he could almost feel the frenzy continuing, the headlines multiplying, the speculation exploding. His mind raced not with fear, but with strategy. How would this play out? What would investors think? Would this spark a public revolt in his favor or fuel the government's case even further? Musk knew one thing for certain. No matter how this ended, he would not let this moment define him. He wasn't built for defeat. Not in business, not in innovation, and certainly not here. The heavy door creaked open again. A different officer entered, carrying a clipboard. "Mr. Musk, you'll be processed shortly. You'll have the opportunity to contact your legal counsel again." Elon opened his eyes, nodded once, but said nothing. His mind was elsewhere, already envisioning the press conference he would inevitably give, the battles he would fight, the spin he would create. Whatever the court decided today, he would make sure the world heard his side of the story louder than ever before. The officer left, and the door locked once more. Alone again, Musk leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped together tightly. He wasn't panicking. He was preparing. In the sterile, empty room, a billionaire's mind plotted revolutions bigger than anything happening within those courtroom walls. The battle wasn't over, not even close. The courtroom resumed shortly after Elon Musk's removal, but the energy inside had shifted dramatically. The air felt heavier, almost haunted by what had just occurred. Chief Justice Roberts returned to the bench with a composed demeanor, but the tension in his jaw gave away the weight of what had transpired. "Let us continue," he said firmly, flipping through the thick files in front of him. Yet every person in the room, from the attorneys to the press to the jury, was still processing the spectacle they had just witnessed. The absence of Elon Musk at the defense table was more than just physical. It was symbolic. A titan had been brought to heel, and the impact echoed across every institution tuned in live. Back in the courthouse holding area, Musk remained seated on the bench, deep in thought. He had declined food, water, and conversation. But his silence was not surrender, it was calculation. His legal team had already begun scrambling behind the scenes, filing emergency motions, appealing to higher courts, and even preparing public statements. Musk's team knew one thing well: narrative. And if Musk had lost control of the courtroom, he could still try to control the court of public opinion. He finally stood, stretched his back, and walked to the small window that let in no light, only the faint hum of activity on the other side. "They're going to regret this," he muttered to himself, more as a vow than a complaint. Meanwhile, the outside world was in full meltdown. Every news channel had gone into 24-hour coverage mode. Analysts debated whether Musk's removal was justified or a dangerous precedent. Hashtags exploded across platforms. Hashtag Musk vs system was trending worldwide. Some called it the fall of a tech god. Others hailed it as justice served at last. Protesters began gathering outside the courthouse. Some carried signs defending him, others demanding accountability. Helicopters hovered above. The atmosphere felt less like a trial and more like a moment of history being written in real time. Inside, Roberts continued the proceedings with stoic resolve. Witnesses were called, evidence reviewed, but everyone knew the drama of the day had already peaked. Still, the justice system moved forward. As the court clerk read aloud the charges, the words hung in the air like thunderclouds. Musk's team, now seated alone without their client, looked determined but burdened. They were fighting not only legal odds but the shadow of their client's personality, his unpredictability, his bravado, and his growing martyr complex. Hours later, Musk was brought back into a private chamber within the courthouse, not the main room. It was agreed, temporarily, that he could appear via remote screen rather than in person, at least until a decision was made on his contempt charge. As he appeared on the monitor, his face was calm, almost eerily so. The judge glanced at the screen but addressed the room. "Let the record reflect that the defendant is appearing remotely, per interim agreement." Musk spoke only once during that session. "I stand by everything I've said." No apology, no retreat. The hearing adjourned with no clear resolution. Outside, chaos raged louder. Protesters clashed with law enforcement. Supporters waved SpaceX and Tesla flags. Opponents carried enlarged images of courtroom quotes. News anchors declared it the most sensational courtroom drama of the decade. Back in his holding room, Musk received the day's media coverage on a tablet handed to him by his counsel. He watched silently, absorbing every word, every spin, every opinion. A quiet smile crept across his face, not one of joy, but of recognition. He knew the system had tried to break him. But in doing so, it may have given him his most powerful weapon yet, the image of rebellion. The trial wasn't over, not legally, not politically, and in Musk's mind, certainly not personally. He knew the war would move beyond the courtroom, into the boardrooms, into the streets, onto the screens of every device around the globe. He set the tablet aside, cracked his knuckles, and whispered under his breath, "Let's see who really wins."